Welcome to Storytime with Quefish. I'm actually going to start reading my own story this time. Title is Effortless Intimacy. Um, I had the title actually in mind before I had any kind of story. Um, so I'm going to do this obviously in chapters. Um, I'm not even finished writing it yet. Um, so anyway, so Effortless Intimacy, I rated it as mature, not for language or violence or anything like that. Just it felt a little bit more intimate than, like, say, a teen or general rating would be. Um, that's just my opinion. I'm sure that this is like disgustingly vanilla for some people. Uh, so, Effortless Intimacy summary is Aziraphale and Crowley learning each other. There is more to intimacy than sex. Thank somebody. Chapter 1. Everything has a beginning. Aziraphale moved about the bookshop, relocating his trinkets and reshelving books, and not really doing much of anything. He was humming something and smiling the smile of someone who wasn't terribly worried about anything. It had been quite a while since the not the end of the world. Neither heaven nor hell had made contact with him or Crowley since their respective trials and releases. Crowley was enjoying being a free agent, causing mischief and low-level mayhem, which, if Aziraphale was being honest, and he did try to be, was actually amusing most of the time. He knew Crowley was not cruel, and he had no interest in being evil in a way that would cause genuine harm. In light of that, Aziraphale could admit that most of what Crowley did was to make himself laugh. Aziraphale, for his part, was content in still being helpful to those in need, performing small gestures that could hardly be called miracles, and handing out blessings as he saw fit. He loved his bookshop, and so long as they didn't try to buy anything, he enjoyed the people who came in as well. Some were actually very enthusiastic and entertaining conversationalists, even if they could be woefully naive about things like trying to interpret writers from the distant past into modern circumstances. No, I'm sorry, but there's no way that Chaucer was writing about computers and electronic mail, sir. Crowley came by the bookshop more often than he didn't, often just after closing time. They would find somewhere to eat and then return to the bookshop for light drinks and conversation. They had gone to Crowley's flat a few times, but even having made the furniture more comfortable, it wasn't very inviting. Crowley had tried, of course, but with the exception of the room full of plants, Aziraphale didn't feel very welcome. Crowley insisted that he was, and he knew that Crowley welcomed him, but he almost believed it was the flat that didn't. Crowley had told him about the demon leaguer and what had happened to him. Perhaps the flat didn't want anyone around anymore, and it was trying to protect its owner. They were closer, less guarded, and even when they would have disagreements or energetic discussions, there was still a fondness that softened any conflicts. And more than fondness, there was love. It took a while for them to both realize at the same moment that it was the right moment to do more than just sit closer on the park bench or get one's attention by holding an elbow. It started gently, with a shy embrace. Aziraphale wrapped his arms around Crowley's middle and was just shorter enough to angle his face into Crowley's neck. Crowley's arms came around Aziraphale's back, holding him snugly, resting his cheek on Aziraphale's head. They each breathed a soft sigh. It was the sigh of someone coming home after a long day, finding comfort in a loved one's arms and detaching from whatever had happened in the hours before. Only this sigh wasn't the result of an hours-long day, but of centuries. It was the calmest Aziraphale had felt that he could remember recently. No worries or anxiety about doing the right or wrong thing. He could feel warmth spreading through his corporation and his soul that told him how right this was. Crowley, on the other hand, couldn't recall the last time he had felt this safe. Of course, he knew that as a demon, he was rarely in danger that he didn't create himself, but it was a different kind of safety. A safety not of his physical form, but of him. His thoughts, feelings, the very spirit of his being felt safe and protected. After that evening, hugs became common. When Crowley arrived, before they went out, when they came back, before Crowley left, and any other time the mood struck them. They had taken to sitting together on Aziraphale's sofa, arms and hands touching as they talked. Sometimes Crowley would lounge the other way, laying his legs over Aziraphale's lap, and Aziraphale would rest his hands on his knee. Crowley enjoyed the warmth from that touch the most. For his part, Aziraphale was finding that he liked touching Crowley very much. He could feel the intimacy between them growing, the familiarity, and he was beginning to want more. What would be next? I suppose... Oh, but would he like that? Or even be willing to try? Aziraphale was talking to himself again. Luckily, there was no one in the bookshop to hear him as he tried to imagine how to approach Crowley with his request. No, not request. That sounds like I'm asking him for a favor. Would desire be the right word? That doesn't quite sound right either. I'll have to think over supper and dessert. He let his mind wander to where they would eat tonight. During a walk earlier in the day, he had noticed that the small restaurant nearby was serving strawberry cake with fluffy cream and fresh strawberries on top. His eyes lit up and he smiled, his tongue already tingling with want. He stopped, and his smile got a touch lighter, his eyebrows raising with a sudden understanding. That is the word I needed. Desire is poetic, but it isn't strong enough. Yes, what I have is a definite want. Crowley arrived moments later, almost startling Aziraphale, who had still been working out what he was going to say later. He walked into Crowley's arms, closing his eyes and just breathing in Crowley's scent. Crowley wasn't much for cologne, but he had a deep, woody smell, crisp and a bit like spice. He could taste the scent as he barely opened his mouth to draw in breath, and he felt that want a little stronger. He let out the breath slowly, almost reluctantly, that feeling that the scent of that scent would dissipate. Hello, Crowley. Hello, Angel. Sell anything today? He let out a breathy laugh, knowing that would rarely be allowed to happen. Aziraphale chuckled as well, taking in another slow lungful of the scent Crowley carried. Of course not. Would I be in nearly as good a mood had I allowed that to happen? No, I'm just glad you are here. Crowley noted that Aziraphale was acting slightly off, but not in a bad way. So he waited to see if any more would be said to clue him in on what was on the angel's mind. He let out an amused snort as Aziraphale continued talking. I hope you had an entertaining day, my dear, and that you won't mind our outing to be to the little shop around the corner. They have a delightful-looking cake on their counter that I believe would be perfect dessert tonight. Angel, anywhere you want. I go where you go. He gently moved his head, tickling his cheek on Aziraphale's hair before relaxing his arms to step back. Aziraphale smiled at him, looking through Crowley's sunglasses to his yellow eyes. His hands trailed the underside of Crowley's forearms as he stepped back as well. He simply nodded and gently gestured to the door. Crowley gave a friendly smirk and led the way out of the bookshop. Shall we? That's the end of chapter 1.